I grew up until I was 12 years old. I lived in New Jersey, and my parents owned what was called the Alden Avenue Sweet Shop. And in the Alden Avenue Sweet Shop, we had a soda fountain and a pool table and a jukebox. And we used to listen to the radio, growing up. WIBG out of Philadelphia, because we lived just across the river.
Wibbage.
Yeah, Wibbage. And on good days, we could get Cousin Brucey in New York at WABC. And then we moved here when I was 12. My father had arthritis and needed a hot, dry climate, so we came here. Immediately, found Chris and Crux, mostly Chris. And so my radio heroes growing up were, Cousin Brucey Morrow, when I could hear him, the jocks over at Wibbage. And then here, I remember Phil Mata, Dogpile on the Rabbit, that whole thing at Chris, William Edward Compton, who I got to meet once, and Toad Hall, that used to be KCAC, KDKB, and actually Jim Spiro, believe it or not. And I remember when they used to have the studio on Central with the glass, and I remember one time when I was there with my sister and her friends, and we were cruising Central, we stopped and watched them. And Mark James, that used to be a Chris. I used to listen to him a lot. TV, used to watch occasionally, if we could get it, Soupy Sales in New York. In Philly, the kid show was Sally Starr. And Sally Starr had been in a Three Stooges movie, sometime in the 50s. And she was a cowgirl, and she used to show the Three Stooges shorts every day, and Popeye cartoons too. So, and then of course we moved here, and it was Wallace and Lattimore, without a doubt. When I was in high school, I came up with two goals. I had a really good English teacher my sophomore year at Coronado High School, Sally Sherrod. And I decided I wanted to be an English teacher. And then the other goal that I had from listening to the radio, KCAC, KDKB was just coming on back then, was I wanted to work in the radio. And I'm lucky because I got to do both of those things. So, I worked a lot. I had a paper route when I was a kid in New Jersey. My mother and my brother and my sister and I, we used to go clean offices. We didn't have a lot of money. My dad worked at a wire mill in Trenton, New Jersey. His claim to fame was that he worked on the cables that went into the Golden Gate Bridge. But neither one of my parents completed high school. My father, when he was a junior in high school, his dad came home, worked at the wire mill, came home one day, and he said, "Joe, they're hiring down at the mill. I got you a job. You start tomorrow." And that was the end of high school for him. My mom was born in Czechoslovakia, never even met her father until she was 10, because shortly after she was born, he emigrated here. They closed the border for 10 years. By the time she came here, she was 10 years old, and it was the first time she met him. She went to school only to 8th grade, and then it was time to go to work. We moved here when I was 12. When I was 16, I started working. I worked at the Casablanca Inn. My mom used to work at the Casablanca Inn. She was a maid there, and then my sister worked there as a maid, and then I got a job working in the restaurant as a busboy until the end of the season in May, because back then they used to close them down, and then open them again in October. So my mom worked there. She worked at the Valley Ho, Camelback Inn, Mountain Shadows, which were about the only resorts in town then. I started cleaning yards. My mom would work for people cleaning their houses and stuff, and I would do yard work, listen to the radio, and I'm hearing KCAC, KDKB, and I'm hearing these ads for Ron Bailey School of Broadcast, the old "you'll feel better when you're on the air." And it kind of stuck with me, and that's when I thought, man, that's what I'd really like to do, working radio, be a DJ. So it took me a long time to get there, but I finally did. But in the meantime, I worked in restaurants for a long time. My best friend who lived down the street from me, his dad owned the Stockyards restaurant. So he and I both worked there as in the kitchen. Actually, I was a food handler, so I would take the orders out, carry the tray out, set down, pick up the dirty dishes, bring them back in, that kind of stuff. And I worked there for like 3.5 years. And he worked there with me. I worked at the Safari Hotel in the coffee shop.
Wow.
I met Hugh Downs there one time. He sat at my table. I wasn't introduced to him or anything, but I got to see Hugh Downs. And I worked nights there, on especially on the weekends. I worked at the Ramada Inn on Van Buren in Phoenix. Daytime I worked as a busboy in the coffee shop. Then I set up the buffet luncheon in the dining room. And then I would come back at night and work catering. But, I was young. I didn't have anything else going on. It was summertime,
Tips?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's what fueled everything. Yeah. I would walk out every night with cash in my pocket. Lots of coins sometimes, but, lots of cash. And I never saved a penny of it. Spent it all, because it's never going to end, right? Yeah, it's never going to end. I enrolled after high school, went to FCC full-time. My family collected Social Security for my dad's disability. And if I was a full-time student, then they could collect a check for me. So when I graduated high school, it was go to college. Don't worry about what for. Just go. We need the check, So I went, but that first year at SCC, it turned out to be, the school kind of turned out to be a joke, and so I was like, what, so I ended up getting a job at American Express Company, worked there for the next 5 years, and loved it. It was the 70s. We worked in that building on 24th and Lincoln.
Yeah.
There were like 2,500 people in that building. I'd say the average age of the employees was probably about 22. Honestly. So it was a great place to work. I started out as a mail clerk, and then I worked my way up into the customer service department. And after 5 years, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. My wife, in the meantime, I got married. My wife ended up working there. And one day I came to her and I said, you know what, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to work here anymore. And she goes, I said, what do I do about that? But by this time we'd already bought a house. We were both making pretty good money there. So, fortunately for me, she just said, well, you go in tomorrow and you give me your 2 weeks notice. That's what you do. And I did that. I didn't have a job to go to or anything, but I ended up working back in a restaurant. Big Four restaurants was expanding. They owned a Willie and Guillermo's and a Lund Avenue Marble Club in Tempe, and they were getting ready to open up the new Willie and Guillermo's on Central in Missouri with the disco. That's where I started working. I worked in the kitchen as an expediter. So my job was to gather the orders together and let the waitress know they were there, and then, and do some quality control. And then eventually I ended up working as a prep cook in there. It was a great time. It was a great time. It really was. We had wonderful people. Mike Lapercio was our head chef. He owns Lapercio's restaurant now. And it was great. It was fun. They had a disco in there. It was a good time. But that was my only job. And I ended up making, because I quit and it was part-time, I ended up making a quarter of what I had been making at American Express, and that wasn't going to cut it, so I had to find something else. Both my parents were realtors when we lived in New Jersey, so it's like, okay, go into real estate. Well, that wasn't a great idea, because that year, 1978, there was like 50,000 realtors in Maricopa County alone. Plus I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I went to real estate school and all that, but, I wasn't really cut out for it. So after a year of trying to do that, I went to my wife and I said, this is not working. And it was no surprise to her, So that's when I said, let me check out broadcasting. So I went down to Ron Daly School there at Central and Palm, and I walked in and said, this is what I want to do. And the guy said, well, we have a class that starts on Monday. And I was like, well, I got a couple of real estate deals that are got to get wrapped up. But he said, okay, well, try us. Then we got another class starting a month later. I said, okay. So that was it. I'm still working at the restaurant at night and going to broadcast school during the day. And 9 months later, I graduated from there and got a job. Marnie Pingree from KOI was one of my instructors.
Oh my.
So was Jack Beveridge.
Oh my.
H.G. Listiak was one of my instructors as well.
Go all the way
Yeah.
back.
Yeah,
People.
they had they had really good people. And the other thing that they had really good placement there. Really, I was like a model student. I did the whole 9 months, never missed a day or even an hour of class.
But you were more of an adult.
I was 27 years old by this time. You know. And I was in a class. There were 10 of us in the class. I was not the oldest person because there was a woman in there who was already in her 50s at the time, but I was probably the second oldest person in there at 27. You know, and it was kind of like Animal House sometimes. But Marnie came to me and offered me a position at KOY, and I met with Nat Stevens, who hired me, who was the program director then. And my job was, they were getting ready to do a Sunday night oldie show. And they had all these reels of tape with all these songs on it. They needed each song on a cart. So that was my job. Midnight to 6 a.m., Monday through Friday, I would go in and cart up these songs.
What year?
This was 1980. 1980. And of course, KOY was the station. So Kit Carson used to be the guy that was on the overnights. He was so gracious to me because he's like, okay, I know you just graduated. I know you really want me to hear your tape. Bring your tape in. You know, so I brought my demo tape in, and he listened to it and critiqued it and gave me some good advice. And he was so gracious. And one night he said to me, he said, how long does it take you to get, how many carts do you get done in a night? Because I had to type labels and everything. I said, I don't know. I get about maybe 20 done a night. He goes, they'd be deliriously happy if you just did 10, right? He said, here's what I want you to do. Here's the live copy from the on-air studio. He gives it to me. He goes, go upstairs, copy it, bring it back. So I do that. And he goes, okay, here's what you do. He goes, do your 10 or 12 carts a night and then play in the studio the rest of the time. Because I was in the production studio, which shared a window with the on-air studio. So that's what I did. So I would get like 12, 15 carts done, and then I would spend the next probably 2-3 hours in the studio doing practice radio shows with the live copy. I still have some of those sheets, some of the live copy. And so that's what I did. And then the last half hour from 5:30 to 6, I would just sit and watch Haywood do the first half hour of the show. Because HG would come in about 4:30 in the morning to start getting the news ready. Haywood would show up around 5 because the show didn't start till 5:30. And I would just sit there and watch Haywood do his show for a half hour every morning. And I'm like, I'm getting paid for this? Not much, but I'm getting paid for this, you know? So it was terrific. That started in March. About July, I decided, you know what, I want to get on the air. And I can't do that in Phoenix. I'm nobody. I'm brand new. Nobody's going to hire me. So a couple of friends of mine actually worked at a station in Gallup, New Mexico, and they needed somebody. So one of those guys played the tape for the PD, and he liked my production skills, so he offered me the job. So he calls me Thursday night and says, you got the job. You got to be here Monday afternoon. I'm like, okay. So I went into KOY that night, and I told Kit, I said, today's my last day. You know, I got to be in Gallup, New Mexico on Monday because I got an on-air job. And I was scared because I was afraid what they were going to say. You know, I mean, Marnie went out on a limb for me, and he's like, don't worry about it. They'll understand. And he was just really genuinely happy because I was going to got a job on the air. And then when HG came in that morning to get ready for the news, Kit Carson calls him in. He goes like, Tom, he got an on-air job. Oh, hey. And then Haywood came in and he shared that, and the three of them were like, hey, brother, you know, this is cool. And they were like, I couldn't believe it. I mean, I was just some part-time overnight guy, wasn't even on the air, and they treated me like I was one of them, you know, and I never forgot that. It was awesome. So I went to New Mexico, and they hired me to do nights. It was station AM signed off at 11 a.m. or 11 p.m., so I did 7 to 11. And so for 3 weeks I did that, and then I got into sales. I went to the general manager, and I said, you know, I'd like to do sales. I need to make more money. My wife stayed here in the valley until we were sure it was going to work, you know, up there. So in the meantime, she found somebody to rent our house out. A few months later, she moves up there, and I'm doing sales and on air during the day at the station, and spent about
Offering her the glamour.
Yeah.
Of Gallup, New Mexico.
Gallup, New Mexico. Yeah, and I won't go into. I could tell a million stories, kind of like you, about just that station alone. But after about 8.5 months, I was like, let's find something else, And so I found a position up in Coos Bay, Oregon, which is on the Oregon coast. And I don't know if you've ever been on the Oregon coast, but it's gorgeous up there. And so that was the good news. The bad news was my wife couldn't find any work up there. When they hired me, they told me, there's a new station taking over June 1st, but they know about you. Everything's going to be fine. I'm like, okay. So we went up there, got up there on April 1st, and they didn't know what the hell to do with me. So they decided that I would do weekends on the air, and then during the week they put me in sales. So the first weekend I get up there, I'm on the air, and then I go to the station Monday morning, and they're like, I don't know what to do. They're like, we can't, the other salespeople don't want to give up any of their clients, so you're not going to get any clients. I'm like, okay. So
What's the format?
Yeah, it's top 40.
And what was the format in Gallup?
Top 40.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mentioned to the general manager, I said, and she was also part owner. I said, Cecilia, I noticed this working this weekend. You guys don't have any national ads. I don't hear anything from any national ads. Not Ford, Chevy, Coke, Pepsi, nothing. And she goes, well, it's been a while since we updated all that information. I said, well, why don't I do that for you? Because they had nothing else for me to do. So she said, yeah, okay. So I spent a month calling all these ad agencies, finding out who's handling the account now, blah, blah, blah. And all of them were like, yeah, just send us a media kit and we'll get you the ads. So I mailed out all these media kits, and sure enough, the ads came rolling in. So that took it the first month. The second month, it was like, okay, we got that done, now what? So my wife and I, when we were here, we used to go to the Mill Avenue Merchants Association thing, Mill Avenue with the Arts and Crafts Fair, And this place in Oregon had a really beautiful downtown. Lots of artists up there. And they had covered the walkways downtown because it rains there so much. So they thought, if we cover it, people will come downtown. The problem was that to pay for covering it, they put in parking meters. And the town right next door, North Bend, had a mall with free parking. It wasn't covered, but it was free parking, and it was indoor shopping. So everybody went there. So all the downtown people were pissed, So my idea was, why don't we have an arts and crafts fair downtown, and we'll try and draw people downtown. So I hit the station manager with the general manager with the idea that morning, and she's like, "That's great. Go out and put a package together, sales package together. What are you going to get? Go out and start talking to people on the street about it. In the meantime, we'll put it on the air." So they had another sales, a young girl who was like 18, right out of high school, had never done sales before. She somehow made it onto the sales team, so she went with me, and we just started talking to people. So we come back at lunch, and we find out that they put a PSA on the air, and they were getting swamped with volunteers who wanted to perform at this thing. It's like, holy cow. So the weird thing was that while we were sitting there talking to her, this young woman comes up to the lobby, to the receptionist, and she's kind of carrying on, yelling, ranting, and raving. Well, she worked for the county independent newspaper, and she just started in sales with them. She had the same idea the same day. And when she went to all the people downtown to talk about it, they were all like, yeah, we know about that. We heard it about it. The radio people were here. She's like, what? What the heck? So we put together a package where for a certain amount, they would get radio, and the newspaper was going to do an 8-page insert. So they got both, a nice big ad plus radio ads for one price. And I had to go to the town council and get them to block off streets. And so I had the town council meeting. I met the town manager, and he was from Tucson, so we had kind of a thing going there, a relationship, Arizona. So I said to him, "Do you guys have any parking meters that don't work anymore, or what do you do with the ones that are damaged or they don't work or whatever?" He goes, "Oh, we warehouse them." I said, "Do you have any of those?" He goes, "Yeah, I got a couple of hundred of them." I said, "Can I have them?" He's like, "Well, I can get you some." He says, "What do you want them for?" So I said, "Well, I was thinking that if we sold a package with both radio and TV, we would give those people a parking meter to give away in their store, because everybody hated the parking meters. Everybody wanted to take one home and hit it with a sledgehammer, right?" So that's what we did. He arranged to give us all those parking meters, and then we put a box, that accepted tickets in the back of the store, so they had to walk all the way through, and they would drop their ticket in with their name on it, and they could win. And each one of them gave away a parking meter because this thing was supposed to happen in one day, and then on June 1st, the new owner took over, and I remember, and you've probably been at these meetings before, but has a staff meeting with everybody, and the first thing he says is, "Look, nobody has to worry. Everybody's job is safe," and within an hour, 3 people were gone. I was not one of them, for at least for 2 more weeks. 2 weeks later, he called me in and fired me and let me go. But I already had something lined up at a station in Wickenburg. A friend of mine from broadcasting school had helped to put that station on the air, and she called me when I knew I was going to be fired, but it hadn't happened yet because my general manager felt badly, and she said, "Look, he's going to let you go." And she tried to help me find a job up there, but there was only one other station in town, and they weren't hiring.
And Wickenburg didn't have any parking meters.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
What were the call letters?
KUUK.
Okay.
And they called it KWK. And the U's were like, shoe horses. I mean, shoe horses.
Okay.
Horseshoes. That's what I meant, horseshoes.
Yeah.
So then I took that job making, it was $400 a week. Or maybe it was $400 a month. I can't remember. It was some piddly sum. And then I would get a commission. Well, the problem was the guy that owned the station had just ticked off every business in town because he was a jerk. And he had stiffed people and wouldn't pay them for stuff. And nobody was going to buy advertising on the station. So after being there a month, I went to the station because they were going to pay my moving costs from Oregon to there. So on the day when I met with my wife, and I met with him that night, because the station signed off at sundown, I think. And and he hands me the check for the moving costs, and I said, I'm leaving. I have to go back to Phoenix because I can't make it here. So he's like, "Well, do you think you should keep the check?" I'm like, "Oh, yes, I should keep this check, but here's the check back, So we moved back into Phoenix. I got a job doing sales at K-Life, KLFF.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, music of your life.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Larry Mazursky.
Yeah, and Jack Blair was one of the people there, and I worked there for a month trying to sell that because, again, didn't give me any clients.
Tough sell.
Yeah. Well, we found out later that he did so many trade outs.
Yes.
There was no cash.
That's right.
Yeah.
And had I sold anything, I would have had to sue them for my commission because that's what every other salesperson ended up doing. I didn't know it at the time, but that's what ended up happening.
He
So
was a Jewish grandfather.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the nice. And his brother was Paul Mazursky of the movies.
Oh,
Remember that?
wow.
Yeah. He had a big.
Yeah.
That one had a big job.
Yeah.
Yeah. Larry was a nice guy.
Yeah. So then I left there, and so now it's September of '81. I called up people at Ron Bailey, and I remember the guy that was in charge, Bill Driscoll. I'll never forget that he was so kind to me because I called him up on the Thursday before Labor Day, and I said, "Bill, I need a job." period. I need a job. He goes, I need an instructor. You start Tuesday. I said, terrific. That was it. So on Tuesday, I drove into...
He said, I need a what?
Instructor. And so on Tuesday, I went to school, and he said, here's the roster. They're in room number 3. Go teach. And that was my introduction to education right there. I ended up spending 3.5 years there. And by the time I left, I was the educational coordinator. So I started out being the nighttime educational coordinator. Jack Beveridge was still working there. And while I was working there, we hired Ned Foster was one of our instructors. Jack Blair was one of our instructors. Jack Beveridge was there. And we had top people. And I would get calls because part of my job was hiring the instructors. And I would get calls from people wanting to, old instructors that had been there years before when things were really different, wanting to come back. And I'd be like, guys, I don't have anything open. And I'm not going to tell Ned Foster, get out so I could hire somebody who I didn't even know, So we did pretty good. And placement was my job. And I found it pretty easy to place people. We got them placed easily, and really it just took phone calls. Yeah. Get on the phone and call people. Like I would call people that had hired our, graduates before. And I say, look, a lot of times they would tell me, I don't have a spot open, but the guy across town does. Here's his name and his number. Call him and he can hire your girl. And that would happen. So Bailey had 7 schools throughout the West. And Phoenix was we had the best placement. And I'm not bragging, I'm just saying it wasn't magic. It was just pick up the phone and call somebody, and say, I got this great person, really talented, wants to work in news or production or on air or whatever, do you have a spot? And that's how we got in place.
Did anyone make it the way you would like that you placed?
Yeah, I lost track of them over time, but one of my students first went to Yuma to do news. Then I found him a spot in Prescott, and he ended up being the spokesperson for I think it was DPS. He wanted his goal was to be an AP reporter, and I don't think he made it because. But the last I heard, he was. Now this is years ago, of course. He was the spokesperson, the what do they call it, public information person for DPS. So he did pretty good.
I don't want to interrupt you, but is this a good time?
Sure.
Because I'm always tempted to ask questions of anybody, no matter what. And having heard the remarkable variety of things that you did and were willing to do and enthusiastic about doing, is there a fantasy job? Anything at all in any career that you didn't get, that you didn't do, that you didn't follow up on, but still is that thing in the back of your mind that I wonder if I could ever have been here or done that?
Yeah, absolutely, yes. And the job is narrator.
The job is?
Narrator. To narrate like a documentary.
I thought you said the job is marriage.
Oh, no.
And I thought afterwards, you're right.
I always wanted to be a narrator. And actually...
A film?
Film, not in it, yeah. And as long as they pay me, yeah. But actually, I did do some of that. When I was a student at Ron Bailey, I got a job working for Honeywell. They had engineering courses that they sent out on audio tape all over the world to engineers. And they hired me to record the audio text, to record on tape the text. So I would have to drive all the way into West Phoenix somewhere. They would sit me in a studio, probably about as big as this table, a set of headphones and a microphone and a script. It was all cold reading because it was proprietary information and they couldn't let it go out. so I would have to read, all of this stuff in a narrator's type of voice. A lot of it was engineering and even chemical terms, and I didn't get to practice. It was OTO, one time only. And while I'm reading it, the engineer on the other side of the window, outside of the booth, is giving me instructions in my earphones, telling me, okay, next paragraph, you're coming up on this word, it's pronounced like this, and that kind of stuff. While I'm, yeah. So they paid me by the recorded hour, and when I first started, it would take me about 3 hours to get an hour on tape, but by the end, it was about an hour to an hour.
That sounds like the most distracting.
It was. Oh, and he had a radio on too at the same time. So it was. Yeah, it was.
But you loved it, haven't you?
I did. Yeah, I did. I would do that again. I don't know why, but I liked it.
Well, there's a couple of names because of the fact that you were talking about Cousin Brucey, who is still on.
Yeah.
The subscriber radio.
Yeah, I've heard him.
Cousin Brucey, Bruce Morrow from New York City, and he's not only playing records, but he's taking requests from all over the country.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Jimmy from Roanoke, Virginia.
Yeah.
But and WIBG in Philadelphia. But Chris, happens that Ron Edwards called me. This is Thursday, Monday. Called me Monday. I haven't talked to Ron in ages. He was for years at Chris, different shifts. He wasn't the kind of guy that would ever be the personality.
Yeah.
Just was solid and always was. And Ron called because Tony Evans, we finally found out, the original Tony Evans passed away in next to Pismo Beach.
Okay.
And he had just dropped out of sight. And the people that were very close to him had no idea. He was 90-something, but when he left, another guy in town, a radio personality, said, so if I'm here and he's not, then it's the guy from Gallup, New Mexico. So the position is still open. He said, I'm going to be Tony Evans. Because Tony, I don't know, were you here then?
Yes.
I remember Tony.
Tony on Chris, he was Mr. Radio. He was to rock and roll what Haywood was to middle of the road.
Okay.
Two biggest personalities in town. Tony leaves town after some considerable time here, and the other guy says, now I'll be Tony Evans. Right? Not even thinking that people would mistake them. He just wanted to use the name.
Uh-huh.
So now when people say, did you hear Tony Evans died? The answer is, which one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Tony's still with iHeartRadio.
Yes.
Right?
Tony too.
The Tony too is still with iHeartRadio, yeah.
But anyway.
Alive and well.
So Phil Motter
Oh, yeah.
and Ron Edwards and W. Stephen Martin and I are going to have lunch sometime next week. I haven't seen any of them for years.
Oh, that's awesome.
Wow, that is
But
awesome.
I knew that
Awesome.
you would find those names.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Tony Evans was the other
And they
guy.
probably know you.
Well, W does. W does because I worked with him for 4 years at KNIX. Tom Jennings is who he would.
W really made his position in the community on KNIX.
Yeah.
But no, we had some good guys, and those were fun years. But you've had a fun life.
Yeah. Yeah.
I knew
And you stayed married.
Yeah, I know. That's the other thing.
Did you meet her at American Express?
No,
No.
we actually met on a blind date.
Okay.
Before either one of us worked there.
Okay.
And my first year in radio, okay, I went from KOI to KYVA to KHSN in Oregon, and then to Wickenburg and back to Phoenix in 1 year.
Wow.
Yeah.
1 year.
Yeah, and we fortunately kept our house. We didn't sell it. We rented it out while we were gone, because by the time we got back into it, that was all we had. The furniture gone, the extra car gone, the appliances gone. You know, we'd taken them with us, and then we ended up having to sell them to get from place to place. So, yeah.
KOY, though, even though it was not the most glamorous job in the world, you were there with Haywood and Listiak and
Yeah.
Nat Stevens, the highly skilled professional
Oh, yeah.
people.
I have been blessed, and Mary, you've heard me say this, but I was blessed to work there at the time that I worked there. I was blessed to be at KNIX at the time that I worked at KNIX.
Those are biggies.
Yeah, I was lucky.
Gary Stevens was the owner, right?
Yes. Yeah.
No, not Steve.
Gary Edens. Gary Edens.
Gary, that's funny.
Yeah.
Gary Stevens.
Okay.
Gary Stevens was the guy who took over at Chris when
Oh,
we
yeah.
left.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Yes.
Where
Nice
did that
looking
come
guy.
from?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gary
And
Edens.
yeah, and I I left off when I was at K Life, and then that didn't work out. I mean, it just didn't after a month. So I started working at Bailey, and then I needed an on-air gig. So Eric Fox hired me at KJ Radio, and I changed my name to Tom Jennings, and I'm like, okay. And I worked weekends there.
KJ was down on First Avenue.
Yeah.
Where the Channel 5 building.
Right, in the Channel 5 building. The AM was on the first floor, and the FM was upstairs. Yeah, and I
The
worked,
studio
he
was
hired
still
me.
there.
Yeah. I worked both AM and FM, but I worked weekends, and they did not have a computerized music log. I'd never seen one of those anyhow. I was working at Bailey from 9 to 2 in the afternoon. Then I would go home, and on the weekends, on Friday, I would go home and catch some sleep and be back a block away at the radio station to go at 7 o'clock. I would pull music and make my music log from 7 to 10, 3 hours, and then go on the air for 8 hours for $4 an hour. Yeah.
You know what you've had in your life, I see this, is altogether trust. People trusted him. You get that?
Yeah.
Well, that's
He's
also why
solid.
he got those
He's solid.
jobs.
Yeah. He's solid.
Yeah.
The trust is there.
I want to know what the hell happened to the parking meters.
Well, as it turns out, I don't know. And here's why. Because like I said, they fired me 2 weeks before the event, and I never found out how it went. Except for, I'm still in contact with a friend of mine who worked at the station there. He lives in California, and I remember asking him one time. I said, "Marty, how did that thing ever come off?" He said, "Oh, it was great." He said the whole downtown was full of people. He said the station had more advertising than they could possibly get. And he said, in fact, it was so successful, they did it again the next year.
Oh, I would imagine it would become an annual.
Yeah.
But if I had gotten one of the parking meters, I mean, that's the kind of prize.
Yes.
I would put it next to my driveway.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
That would be, that would be cool.
Absolutely. No, just for fun.
Yeah.
I do.
Where the
That would be
hell did
cool.
you get that? Well, I've got this friend in Oregon.
Yeah.
And you weren't even in promotions at the time.
No.
You were just putting to.
I was just trying to keep a job.
Yeah.
you know, because I had just moved up there.
Well, you picked the right guy to
Yes.
open the biography.
Well, thank you.
So
It
interesting.
was
I knew
Yeah.
you would be. We know.
And
Yeah.
I think you were wisest when you decided to leave New Jersey.
That's probably the best thing my parents ever did for us.